friends, today we're talking about the flu.
More specifically, the Spanish flu pandemic of 1918.
Did the Spanish flu only affect Spanish people?
Nice try, me from the past. You have quite a lot to learn.
The Spanish flu pandemic of 1918 is often overlooked in world history, despite the global impacts on population and economy.
But why was it overlooked?
The intensity of the pandemic only lasted a year. When you compare it with other pandemics, the percentage of the population affected would not be considered very high.
That's right. The bubonic plague killed about 1/3 of the world's population, while the Spanish flu killed about 20% of the world's population. The numbers are so different because in the 20th century, the world population was drastically larger than in the 14th century. Although the Spanish flu killed more people, in comparison to other pandemics, it is overlooked due to how long it lasted, as well as who was affected.
Despite what we from the past might think, the flu did not originate in Spain. The flu's origins have varied, but medical scientists rumor that the strain of the flu derived from a genetic mutation in China.
Wow. One of the first recorded instances in 1918 was in Fort Riley, Kansas. Soldiers were being spread across the globe to fight during World War I.
Here it began, with one soldier coming down with the flu, then the following day, hundreds of soldiers were being hospitalized. This is a perfect example of how the first wave of the flu began.
The virus had a profound hostility with a mortality rate of 2.5%. While compared to previous influenza epidemics, they were less than 0.1%. Additionally, the death rates of 15 to 34-year-olds of influenza and pneumonia were 20 times higher in 1918. Those hit with the illness died horrid rapid deaths. The Spanish flu pandemic came in 3 waves. The first wave introduced the intensity and rapid death to the second wave. The third wave was the aftershock to the tragedy. Many of the victims were misdiagnosed due to illnesses similar to pneumonia.
The first wave began by exposed troops spreading the flu after being sent to war. Soldiers lived in very close quarters at this time.
Psst, not the cleanest quarters either.
Trench warfare, barracks, and medical centers are just a couple of examples of how World War I provided the perfect breeding ground for this strain of influenza.
The second wave hit immediately, spreading rapidly. The 13 weeks between September and December of 1918 were the most intense period, taking the greatest number of lives.
The third wave was not nearly as impactful globally. It ended in the summer of 1919. Those infected either died or developed an immunity.
Some of the countries that had previously been quarantined were hit with the pandemic in the third wave.
One example of this is Australia. The nation quarantined to avoid mass devastation, but by the beginning of 1919, thousands were dying.
The symptoms of the Spanish flu were gruesome.
Victims had their skin begin to turn blue and their lungs filled with fluid. Along with this came bleeding out of every orifice and coughing up foamy blood.
They would eventually die within hours or days.
Those who were young and healthy easily contracted the flu, which is why this was so unusual. There was little to no immunity from influenza.
20 to 50 million people died worldwide, which is about 10 to 20% of the world's population. More people died from the influenza in a single year than the bubonic plague killed in 4 years.
Although many died, 1/3 of the world was infected.
A quote from Francis Blake, a member of the pneumonia unit, described, "Every corridor, and there are miles of them, with double rows of cots. With influenza patients, there is only death and destruction."
A shortage of doctors and physicians led to hospitals piling up. Makeshift medical centers were made in schools. Mass graves were made from the overflowing amount of bodies in funeral homes. Many people had to dig their own family members' graves.
The world suffered immensely. The economy began to suffer, and the people were afraid to leave their own homes.
Many shops began to shut down due to sick workers and poor businesses. This broke the economy. The health of the future generations were also affected.
Only 2/3 of the world's population was left, but this also helped lead to medical advances in research. Nearly 90 years later, it was discovered what made the pandemic so deadly. A group of 3 genes helped to let the virus weaken the victims' immune systems.
Although overlooked, the dramatic effects would continue to play a key role in the history of the 20th century.
Only so many pandemics have had such a drastic mortality rate.
In Great Britain, 228,000 died.
In the US, 675,000 people died.
400,000 deaths in Japan.
And roughly 12 to 17 million deaths in India alone.
What 21st century pandemic will kill all of us?
See you next week. Maybe.